Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast. It is always good to go back down to Florida, and welcome back to the show, Frank. How are you doing today, Frank?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you coming on as much as you have. You've become kind of a mainstay of the show, and I know the fans really appreciate all that you bring to it.
No, happy to do it. We probably cruise way more than we should, but that's we really do enjoy it.
Yeah, I wish I could be cruising as much as you. Well, pretty excited today. We're going to talk to you about two different ports, kind of a back-to-back cruise on the Wonder. But before we jump into that, today Disney released their 2020 summer itineraries. Did you have a chance to take a look at them by any chance?
I did, yeah. I briefly saw them over my lunch break today and took a look.
Anything stick out to you that kind of piqued your interest? I know you're headed to Europe to do an Adventures by Disney this summer, but anything in 2020?
It looked like there were some things that either they haven't done in a while or haven't done before. I think they added some Greek island stops to some of the Med cruises, which I thought was sort of interesting. I was a little disappointed because they're not doing any of the longer Alaska cruises, it doesn't look like, which is something we thought about wanting to do at some point. But yeah, I think most of this was pretty predictable. I think what they do in the summertime is pretty standard in terms of the various places that the ships are. I don't envy the folks that work at DCL come Monday morning when people start calling to be able to book this stuff. I think it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it was. I guess I had just a couple thoughts. I was kind of disappointed that they didn't have the longer Alaska cruise too. I did see they're doing a DVC members cruise out of Alaska next year. So
I didn't know that. I didn't notice that.
I think Christy sent me the link to it.
Okay.
I guess so. I think 2020 one of the members cruises is going back up to Alaska, and I guess I had some thoughts on the Greek Isles cruises. I think that's going to be pretty excited for a lot of people. It's cool that one of them is going to Dubrovnik. I'm not sure if you've been over there by any chance.
I have not. I've actually been on a cruise of the Greek islands many years ago, but was not at Dubrovnik. We were at Santorini and a couple other places I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I think there's some interesting stuff there.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of cool that they're going to Dubrovnik. The very first cruises I ever did, we went with some friends on Norwegian, and it went down through Croatia, Athens, down to Turkey, and so it's kind of neat to see them do that. The only thing is I was kind of like dreaming of, which I think would be awesome if they could have done it, was if they would have left one of those cruises left out of Rome and worked their way around to Venice, and then the next cruise left out of Venice back to Rome, rather than doing the back-to-back out of Rome. So I had to get two people kind of say, I've already been to Rome, I want to go someplace else. But but I think it's cool that they added something different on. So
yeah.
Well, let's jump into your guys' cruise now. Why don't you kind of give us just a brief overview of where it left, where it went, and then we'll kind of start from there.
Yeah, so we did back-to-back cruises on the Wonder, and the first cruise was actually a repositioning cruise from Galveston to San Juan, and then the second cruise was a Southern Caribbean from San Juan and back. One of the things we did was, because we were going to be gone so long, we were gone for almost 2 weeks, we leave out of here at Jacksonville, and we were about a little less than an hour from the airport, and we had an early morning flight. So there's actually a couple of hotels around the Jacksonville airport that have these deals where if you stay one night, you can park your car for up to 2 weeks. And I figured it out, and then ended up being cheaper than just parking the car at the airport for the trip. So we actually, the night before the cruise, went to the airport hotel, stayed there for the night, and then left the car for the time we were there. And we're ready to get our flight out of Jacksonville to Galveston the next morning at 7:30.
Yeah, that's a great tip. We did that once a long time ago to Seattle when we went to Paris, and it was, like you said, it was cheaper to spend the night in the hotel, park the car there. So that's a great tip for a way to park your car when you're going to be gone that long. So I'm assuming you guys flew into Houston and then made your way to Galveston. How was that?
We did. So I actually had airline points for these flights. We went from Jacksonville, I believe, to Charlotte, and then from Charlotte to Houston. And the other thing for people to know that are taking that trip where they're going to be going to cruise out of Galveston and they have to fly is that you cannot actually fly into Galveston. You need to fly into Houston. And the other piece is that there's two airports in Houston. There's Bush Intercontinental, which is more in the north part of town, and there's Hobby, which is further south. And Hobby's a good bit closer to Galveston, and that's where we flew into. That was pretty simple in terms of getting we just got an Uber from there down to the hotel we were going to stay for the night before the cruise. It was about a 45-minute drive, and it was just really pretty easy.
So about 45 minutes to Galveston? Your hotel was in Galveston?
From Hobby, yeah. We stayed at the Harbor House, which is actually right next to the port on the pier. So it was literally like a walk across a parking lot to get to the port the next morning.
Oh, perfect.
So that was really, really nice. And so the other thing that we did for this trip is we decided we were going to try to be minimalist packers. And so we were able to, my wife and I, for 2 weeks, travel just with our carry-on bags.
Oh, wow.
Our rolly suitcases and our personal item, with the plan that we were going to do laundry on the cruise halfway through, which we ended up doing. And so I managed to figure out how to pack everything we were going to need in sufficient quantities except sunscreen.
Oh, no.
So when we got to Galveston, this was the plan all along. There was actually a CVS not too far away, and I just walked over there and bought a couple of big bottles of sunscreen to have on the cruise. But, everything else was fine to get into this, little tiny bottles that you can carry onto planes with you. But there was no way we were going to get enough sunscreen in there for 2 weeks.
Oh, definitely not. So a lot of people have never cruised out of Galveston. You're the first person I think we've talked to that has cruised out of Galveston. What were kind of overall thoughts? Was there much to do that evening? Did you guys just hunker down at the hotel? Or what were your kind of thoughts of Galveston before we talk about the cruise itself?
So Galveston has an area with a lot of attractions and things like that, but it's not actually right down by the port. It's on the other side of the island. So Galveston is an island for people who don't know. But down by where we were on the pier, there was also a good bit of stuff going on. There were like 3 or 4 different restaurants and some other stuff happening around there. And so we just, walked over. There was this seafood restaurant with a balcony that looked right out over the water. We just had dinner there. And that was pretty much all we did that night because we were, going to be leaving the next morning. Right. But I think for people who wanted to go and spend a few days in Galveston, there's lots of things to do down there, but most of it's not right by the port there. It's actually on the other side of the island, so that might come into consideration when people are trying to figure out where to stay.
So you guys get up the next day, and did you just walk over then?
Yeah, I think the people that were parking in the parking deck had to walk further to get to the port entrance than we did from the hotel where we were staying, so it really wasn't that bad at all. We just rolled our suitcases down the sidewalk. And the day that we left Galveston, I believe the Wonder was the only ship in port. They can have several ships in port there. So we walked on over there. They let us in at around 11 o'clock and the check-in security and everything was really pretty simple. We went right through. People there were really nice. The one woman who checked us in was talking about how sad she was that she really loved working for Disney Cruise during the time that they were sailing out of Galveston, but this was the repositioning cruise in the last one. So she was kind of sad to see the Disney Wonder go, but really simple process. They have a very nice waiting area there in the port, which unlike Port Canaveral has lots of seats. That's the one thing about Port Canaveral that I think is a little bit sometimes uncomfortable for people is it's a nice waiting area, but it doesn't have a lot of seats. This one had plenty of seats for pretty much everybody on the cruise. We're platinum, so we were in the first boarding group, and we were on the ship at about 11:30.
Perfect. So now you guys are on the Wonder. I know most of your cruises lately have been out of Port Canaveral, and the Wonder doesn't get up there as much. When was the last time you guys were on board the Wonder?
So we've done about 15, 16 Disney cruises now. We've only been on the Wonder once before, and that was an Alaska cruise, and that's been about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
So it had been a little while.
Yeah, so what were your thoughts getting back on board the Wonder then?
Yeah, we were really looking forward to being back on the Wonder again because we hadn't been there very often. And we tend to like the smaller ships. The Magic is probably our favorite ship. There's just something really comfortable about that. But we really thought it was pretty neat, liked all the decorations and everything. It was an interesting cruise because I think that there were a lot of people on that cruise who were from Texas. They sort of asked that on the first night, where are people from? And probably at least half the people seemed to be from Texas. A number of them, I think, were first-time cruisers, many more than we've seen before. And there was probably the smallest number of kids that I've ever been on a Disney cruise with. And I'm thinking maybe it's because it was during school time and it was a repositioning cruise. We actually talked to one very unfortunate woman who's told us that she had booked this cruise because it was a very good deal. And then about 2 weeks before the cruise, she realized the ship wasn't coming back to Galveston.
Oh, no.
So she had to scramble to find a way home from Puerto Rico. But it was, and there's lots of things that we like about the smaller ships. And I will confess that one of my favorite things is the shawarma station. I was the first one there on the cruise, and I think I may have had shawarma pretty much every day we were on the ship.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. So you skip Cabanas and Tritons or whatever they have open straight to the shawarma station, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, go ahead.
One of my favorite things about sailing out of different ports is just at sail away time and the opportunity to see different things. And so after the muster drill, which was as not fun as usual, it's the one thing about Disney cruises that I wish they did differently, because we unfortunately had one of those outside, right in the blazing sun muster stations. And so that wasn't all that much fun. But once we managed to get through that, we went up to the top deck up front to sort of watch sail away. And it's kind of interesting coming out of Galveston, and there's a little Coast Guard base there, and there's some other sort of interesting things. And we also saw dolphins swimming out in the water and jumping around. So that was kind of cool when we're cruising out of Galveston to see that stuff.
So I've got a question about that, but before we do, let's just to kind of backtrack a little bit. So I know for those of you who might be interested in sailing out of Galveston, it seems like in the past, the prices have been pretty good out of there. Like if there's places you can find a discount, Galveston is one of them. And I know that they just signed a pact to extend it for 2 years at least out of Galveston. Do you remember?
I know they signed an extension. I'm not sure exactly how long it was, but they're going to be there for a while longer.
So they'll definitely be coming back out of Galveston. So when you sail away, now I've been to New Orleans, but just recently flying down to Orlando back and forth, they have these big channels that go through like the bayou that lead you up to New Orleans. Is Galveston like that by any chance at all, by the Houston area?
Not really, because Galveston's a barrier island. And so there is sort of a cut that you have to sail through to get out into the Gulf, but it's not like sort of narrow bayous or anything like that to get out.
Okay. I'm really curious. I really want to do one of those New Orleans sailings just for the exit and the entrance from New Orleans Harbor, because you kind of go through.
Yeah, because the dock is on the Mississippi River there.
Yeah. So I'm kind of excited about that. But okay, so now this first sailing from Galveston to San Juan is your cruise, because you are the sea guy, and I know your wife. And so you were the good husband and left the second sailing where you do all the stops for her to kind of keep her happy and in a good mood, right?
Right.
So, well.
Yeah, so we started out, and the other thing that we did is we wanted to have a chance to experience the restaurants on the Wonder, because, again, we'd only been on there once before. So we ended up, at least on the first cruise, we just had planned to have dinner in those restaurants pretty much every night. So we had a chance to try those out. But then following the day we left, we had 2 sea days. So that was, fun for me, actually for both of us. So on the first sea day, we actually did the chocolate and liquor tasting, which is my wife's favorite tasting because she loves anything chocolate. And that was a lot of fun. And the nice thing about that is that I get the double serving of the scotch that comes at the end, because she doesn't drink scotch. But
another win-win for you guys.
That's right. And then the other thing that we did that day that we had never done before is, instead of having breakfast, lunch at Cabanas or whatever, Triton's actually had a brunch that day, and they had a menu that had both breakfast items and lunch items on it. We had really never seen anything like that before, so that's, I think, something that's worth looking out for. They may do that on the ships, I'm not exactly sure, but we really enjoyed that because my wife was more interested in breakfast and I was more interested in lunch, and so it worked out pretty well. And then we just did all sorts of kind of other fun things around the ship. We won 70s trivia because that's my wheelhouse as far as music goes. We did not win TV Tunes trivia because there were some people there that seemed to know every TV show that had ever been made. The other thing that we did on the sea days, and we did these on several different days, is they have these game shows during the day down in the promenade that we had never really gone to before, but which were a lot of fun. One of them was The Wheel, which is basically like Wheel of Fortune, and one of them was The Feud, which is like Family Feud. And it was just fun to go down there and just watch the kids having a good time trying to answer all the questions. So we really enjoyed doing that. We also ended up seeing a couple of movies on the sea days. We saw Nutcracker in the Four Realms in the movie theater on one of the days, and saw A House with the Clock in Its Walls, which was actually playing in the stateroom, and we hadn't seen that one, so we went ahead and watched that one because we were interested in seeing that as well. And then because it's a cruise that was less than 6 days, we had the evening we had dinner in Tiana's. They sort of do the combined Princess Mardi Gras whole thing together. And so it was the big show with the band, and with Tiana and with Lewis, and the parade going around. And we had really been looking forward to seeing that, and really had a great time there, and really enjoyed Tiana's quite a bit.
Yeah, are you a fan of kind of that Cajun food and then also the music to go with it?
I am.
Yeah.
I am. Really enjoy that stuff. We love going to New Orleans and love that kind of stuff, and really was pleased with that.
Before we kind of jump into some of the food stuff as you're talking about and some of the C-Day stuff, what kind of cabin did you guys book, and how did it work since this is a back-to-back cruise? Were you able to stay in the same cabin on both cruises, or did you have to change?
Yeah, we had actually booked these two cruises opening day, whenever it was that they first came available, because we had known that we really wanted to do this. And so we were able to get the same cabin for both cruises. And we booked an Ocean View cabin on Deck 7, which was fine. We had a nice view, plenty of natural light. And because we had the same cabin for both cruises, we didn't have to pack up in between. We were just able to sort of leave everything in our stateroom and have the same stateroom attendant for both cruises, and really was pretty simple. My understanding is that if you do a back-to-back cruise, if you have separate cabins, they still don't make you pack everything up. I was talking to someone who did it, and they said, if you have anything on a hanger, just leave it on a hanger. We'll move that for you, and just pack your other stuff up, and then we'll just sort of move your suitcases to wherever you're going for the next cruise. But we didn't have to do any of that, so that was really nice.
Wow, so they'd move a bunch of your stuff for you. That made it nice for you guys too. So all you had to do, and once you got to San Juan, is just get off and then re-clear and then come back on again.
We had the option to do that. Actually, we had never been to San Juan before, so we actually got off the ship and spent the day in the city.
Okay.
And went out and did some stuff. We can talk about that at some point if you'd like to.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. So, well, cool. Anything else about the food? Did you guys take in Palo, or we talked about Tiana's, which is the big one, but...
So on our other sea day, so we did the chocolate liquor tasting on one sea day and the Triton's brunch, and then we did Palo brunch on the other sea day. That was fabulous. I mean, they are really, our server was telling us that they had just gotten a new chef who was really trying to up his game, and there was some really fabulous stuff. And they've actually, at least on the Wonder, brought back a couple of things that had been on the Palo brunch menu years ago and gone away, but were back. So we actually got both the strawberry soup and the grape and gorgonzola pizza. And so for people who are Palo brunch fans from way back, those were things that a lot of people loved, but they had taken off the menus. So
they just recently upped the price at Remy. I was online talking to Disney last night because of some things we were trying to change around with our upcoming cruise. And the cast member I was talking to was saying that they have brought in a chef from Victoria Albert's, and that's part of the reason that's at least part of the reason they're justifying the upcharge. They're really trying to re-up their menu. Did you kind of feel the same way with Palo too?
Well, so on the first cruise, we did the Palo brunch, and I really thought they had upped their game with that. On the second cruise, we did Palo dinner one night, and that seemed to be the same as it had always been,
okay.
Which is certainly excellent, but it really didn't seem particularly different. Their Palo price, I think, has gone now from $30 a person to $40 a person.
Right.
So that's not out of control, but the Remy price really has gone up significantly. I think it's well over $100 a person now.
Yeah.
And we love Remy, but hopefully they've really going to up their game for that price.
Yeah. And that's what I was kind of wondering, because you're right. Like the Palo price has gone up, but it's like more palatable, but the Remy price really went up. But I guess if the chef is, coming from Victoria and Albert's and they really upped the experience even more than what it already sounded like it was, maybe it's justified, but still tough to do that every night. Right. So anything else on the sea days that you guys did? The
other thing is they had a guitar player in the Quiet Cove that we enjoyed. And one of the things people may not be aware of is that the Cove Cafe there, which is the coffee bar, during the day has an assortment of free pastries that are actually really good. They're really fresh, and you can just go in there and get some. And then in the evenings, they have an assortment of antipasto, hors d'oeuvres kinds of things, meats and cheeses and olives and things like that. So it was nice to just sort of go grab something there and then sit out and watch the ocean go by, listen to the guy playing the acoustic guitar, and just sort of relax. I knew they had the antipasta in the evening, but I didn't realize they had the pastries. So the Cove Cafe is really my wife and I's favorite place to go to, or one of our favorite places, so we'll have to check it out next time. Yeah, and we actually, on one of the days, did the Mocha Experience. I don't know if you've heard about that. No, what's that? So basically, it's this super fancy chocolate liqueur extravaganza. And I have no idea how to describe this. There are pictures of it online, but essentially they make this pot of this just sort of fabulous chocolatey liqueur sort of drink. And then it also comes with some truffles, and it's kind of this whole fancy setup. And that was actually kind of fun too.
Is that over in the Cove Cafe, or where do they have
It's in the Cove Cafe.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's Mocha, Moka, for whatever reason.
Okay, I was just pulling it up to see if I could find any pictures of it online. So, yeah, did that come at a cost, or was that?
Yeah, that was at a cost.
Okay.
Yeah, so all the drinks in the Cove Cafe, the coffee drinks and tea drinks and all that stuff are at a cost, but the pastries and the antipasto and all that are not. So you can just get whatever you want as far as those.
Well, before we move into day 4, so we covered your first 2 sea days into Falmouth, Jamaica. Frozen was on board that night. Did you guys do any of the evening shows? And what did you think of Frozen if you went and saw it?
So we did not do Golden Mickey's the first night. Just we're kind of a little tired, but we did go to Frozen. And it's funny because we are not huge fans of the movie, but we loved the show. It was really good.
Uh-huh.
And if you talk about the shows, Beauty and the Beast is my wife's favorite. Aladdin is my favorite. But Frozen, we just thought was fantastic. And one of the things that we did that I think really helps with the experience is we sat fairly close to the front. We were probably in about the, 7th or 8th row. And just being able to see a lot of the things they were doing, like with the puppets and some of the other stuff up close, was really cool. I will warn people, though, that if you sit too far to the front for Frozen, you're going to get covered in the fake snow. And we were just, it was all over everything, but that was fine.
Uh-huh.
But there's some really impressive effects in that show that we really thought were really neat, and really did enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, I think I'm a little frozen out, probably like a lot of other people, and I don't even have girls at home, but we really enjoyed that show, and actually seeing the trailer, I'm kind of intrigued with the Frozen 2 coming out, so see what that story's all about.
Yeah, it looks like it's taken a dark turn.
It did. So, well, cool. So, anything else for your sea days that we missed?
No, I don't think so. I think those are the main things that we did.
All right. So, day 4, you're on to Falmouth, Jamaica. Now, had you been there before, and what did you guys have planned?
No, we'd never been to Jamaica before, and so we sort of looked through all the things that were available and thought that the thing that looked most interesting and that people had told us was worth doing was climbing Dunn's River Falls. So we booked that excursion.
Can you talk a little bit about that, what that is and what you guys did?
Yeah, so I think Falmouth is sort of interesting because there's a port area that is almost like a gated city, and it has all sorts of restaurants and shops and all kinds of things, and is, from what I understand, and I don't have any reason not to believe this, a very safe area. But apparently the surrounding area, there's just not much around there. It's not like it's in one of the major cities in Jamaica. It's not like there's a lot of things outside. So most of the recommendations that I've seen is if you're going to leave the port area, make sure you have some kind of definitive idea of where you're going, how you're going to get there, et cetera. So most of the excursions that we looked at actually are quite some distance from the port. So Dunn's River Falls, where we went, was about an hour bus ride away from the port. And what Dunn's River Falls is basically this beautiful waterfall that someone many years ago sort of figured out was configured in such a way that you can actually use the rocks as steps and actually climb up the falls. And so it's apparently one of the big things to do for people in Jamaica. And we had a really good time with that. But it's about a 2-hour climb because you climb as a group and everybody sort of tries to stay together. They divide everybody into groups of about 10 or 12 people, and each group stays together, and they try to make sure that everybody's helping everybody. But the guides there were just fantastic. We had several guides assigned to our group, and one of them appeared to be sort of the cheerleader. One of them sort of was the person who was making sure we knew exactly where we were going. And then one of them actually videoed the whole thing.
Oh.
And so at the end, they offer you the opportunity to buy the DVD. I think it was about $40, and we bought the DVD and had a lot of fun watching that when we got home. And they had lots of video of sort of the whole climb up the falls. But one thing that I think is really important for people to know is that this is not an experience where there's any possibility of you staying dry. You are basically in a waterfall from bottom to top, and you're going to be soaked from head to toe once you've been there for about 5 minutes. Off to the side, they actually do have man-made ramps and steps and things like that for people who either don't want to try to climb at all, or they might be halfway, third of the way through and decide, I just can't do this anymore. There is a way to sort of get out and still go to the top and see things from the top if you want to do that. And then that's the way that you get back down at the end. But that was a really cool experience. I'm really happy that we did that. We had a great time and got some pretty cool pictures of us soaked to the skin, but still it was a lot of fun.
I think you sent me a picture of you and your wife, and it looked just beautiful.
Yeah.
This is going to be a weird. Go ahead. Sorry. This is going to be a weird question, but what kind of shoes did you wear? Like I'm thinking about Roxy. Like sometimes they can be really slippery.
So they actually require water shoes.
Okay.
And we knew that, and we brought our own, but they were selling them. I think they were selling them for $10 a pair or something like that.
Okay.
Because they required. Now, I think you could wear, like sneakers or something like that, but you really need something with a good rubber sole that grips, because some of it can be pretty slippery, and certainly you don't want to climb up barefoot.
Right. Yeah, I was just kind of curious about that. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was funny. I mean, there were several women who were really unhappy because they had done their hair and all that, and they just ended up getting soaked.
No.
We saw another couple who thought that they were going to get away with wearing rain ponchos, and those were completely useless. So.
Kind of the Splash Mountain crowd, huh? With their rain poncho on.
Yeah, but you're going to get a lot more wet. I mean, this is like one of those raft rides where they basically just dump water on you. That's basically what's happening the whole way.
Well, when you guys get done with the excursion, did you kind of wander around the little downtown area? Did you have any thoughts of that area at all?
After we climbed the falls, there was actually a second portion to the excursion. We went a little ways, and then there was about a 30, 45-minute opportunity to do a little snorkeling, which is my wife's favorite thing. So we did that. And then sort of went back to this was on a boat, and the boat went back to the pier. And this is where some great miscalculation took place on the part of some of the people on our tour, because at the pier, there were bathrooms. Now, on the boat, once we got done with the snorkeling, there was rum punch and beer and all kinds of stuff, and people were having a really good time. But unfortunately, some people miscalculated their ability to make it on an hour bus ride back.
Oh, no.
So one of the things that had happened, which was nice, is on the bus ride out there, I forgot to mention this, one of the guides on the bus took lunch orders for anybody who wanted to order lunch, because food wasn't included, and this was like a 6-hour excursion. So fortunately, we went ahead and ordered some lunch. They had like jerk chicken and jerk pork and stuff like that. That was really good. But anyway, on the bus ride back, we were probably 20, 30 minutes in, and a mom with a small child started walking up to the front and basically begging the bus driver to stop because her child had to pee. And so he finally just sort of pulled off to the side of the road. The kid went off in the bushes, came back, and then we were on our way again. But then about 20 minutes later, some of the adults who had, again, made these miscalculations started to complain that they weren't going to make it, and ended up convincing the bus driver to pull to the side of the road again. And grown men and women were out there in the bushes on the side of the road. So it actually ended up taking us about an hour and a half to get back to the port. And by that point, it was almost time for the ship to leave. So long story short is we didn't get much opportunity to see any of the stuff around the port area because we needed to get back on the ship.
Well, back on board you guys go. Anything that night before you finish up with your last day at sea?
Yeah, so we were actually pretty worn out, and we had late seating for dinner, which is what we usually have, but we sort of felt like we just want to get something to eat now. So we actually ended up going to Cabanas for dinner that night, and actually had a really good experience. I don't know if people know much about Cabanas dinner, but every night except for the first and last night of the cruise, there's dinner in Cabanas, and it basically, I think, runs from like 6:30 to 8:30, and there's no reservations. It's just walk in, and it's table service, and the folks that are serving in there are crew members who are sort of working to become servers, and this is sort of the way that they get a chance to practice in a kind of less stressful environment. But the really nice thing to my mind about Cabanas dinner is they have selections from all the menus in the different dining rooms, but everything is pretty much made when you order it, as opposed to, unfortunately, the main dining rooms. They do the best job they can, but they're serving hundreds of people, and it's sort of a kind of a banquet service sort of thing. Whereas for example, I had a steak for dinner in Cabanas, and actually they were cooking the steaks right across the way there in the kitchen up there, and it was probably one of the best steaks I've ever had on a cruise. So that was a really nice experience.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of pointed that out. We've actually been up there twice, and eating at cabanas, and just love the experience. Kind of like as you're talking about, there was not very many people are up there in the evening, so we sat and talked to our server for probably about a good 15 or 20 minutes. At one point we're just like, hey, you might as well just sit down with us, because it was just that he was just helping us out, and it was just fascinating kind of hearing his story. And like you said, the kids' meals, I think one of my kids is a big mac and cheese fan, and a lot of times I'll just be honest, it comes lukewarm and maybe even cold, down in the main dining rooms. But it was like fresh mac and cheese, and I can't remember. I think I had some fish, which was really fresh too, or freshly cooked up. So that's a good point, Frank. So on to your last sea day before you guys get to San Juan. Anything there that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, so we actually did quite a few things that day. That was laundry day.
Oh, yeah.
So we did that. And the laundry system has changed, at least from the last time we did laundry on a Disney cruise, which has been a little while ago. So basically, you use your Key to the World card for everything. And I'm not sure I understand why they do it this way, but you go in the laundry room and there's one station where you basically load credits onto your card. And then you take your card and you go over to the washers and the dryers and you use those credits to do your laundry.
Yeah,
seems like an extra step there, but
it seems like you could just charge it to your card, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we got that done. We went to one of the things we enjoy going to when we get a chance is they have a series of, it's called Anyone Can Cook, where they'll have one of the chefs come in and demonstrate how they make a particular dish, and they give you a sample of that, usually with a glass of wine, no charge for that. And so they were doing mushroom risotto that day.
Ooh.
So we got to see how they do that, and that was pretty good.
Where's that held at?
It's in the, what do they call that big sort of family lounge area? I'm walking on the name.
The D Lounge.
The D Lounge, yeah, that's where it was.
Okay.
Yeah, and usually those are like mid-morning on sea days. They'll do a variety of different things. We went to one on the second cruise as well, where they were making something different. I'm trying to remember. Oh, apple strudel was the other one that we got to see them do.
Well, the risotto would have been right up my wife's alley. Did you have to sign up ahead of time, or did you just show up?
No, you can just show up for that, and there's usually plenty of room, and that was a lot of fun. And then we did our, I think I've talked about this before, our favorite event on any Disney cruise, which is Jack Jack's Incredible Diaper Dash.
Yes.
It was that day. So they were racing babies. And that was quite a bit of fun. And then the other thing that actually turned out to be one of the best meals we had is we had lunch in cabanas. And sometimes I think people don't get far enough along the buffet to realize that they always have sort of one station towards the end of the buffet where it makes the turn around to the other side that changes every day. So like one day it'll be Indian food, another day it'll be Mexican food, that sort of thing. But they had that day what they called their seafood buffet. And they just had some amazing stuff. I mean, they had some coconut shrimp that was fabulous. They had some Thai curry mussels that were just amazing. They had crab cakes. I mean, just really some high quality stuff. We were really pretty impressed because Cabanas is usually fine. It's just sort of typical buffet food, but this was really good. We were really impressed with that. So I would recommend to people, if you're ever having lunch in Cabanas, make sure you walk all the way around and see where they're kind of hiding the special stuff, because sometimes they have some really good things there.
So you broke out of your shawarma to make it to Cabanas.
Yeah, I think that was the one day I didn't have any shawarma. And then the other thing we did that day is we went and saw Mary Poppins Returns, because we hadn't seen that before. So we had a chance to see that.
What did you think of Mary Poppins?
I thought it was fine. I mean, it doesn't come anywhere close to the original, but we enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's anything we have to see multiple times or anything like that, but...
A bit entertaining. From there, you guys end up in San Juan the next day. We kind of talked about the turnaround as far as your room went. Anything else people should know about, if you're doing back-to-backs, as far as any tips as far as to help them out if they're going to do something like that?
There's several things that happen usually the night before. One is that your head server comes over and he talked to us about, were you happy with your serving team? Do you want to have them again? Any issues with that? And we said, no, they were great. We're fine. We can just stay with them. And then they give you information about what to do the following day. And they actually give you this separate boarding card that indicates that you're a back-to-back person. So, generally when you check in for a Disney cruise, you get a card with a boarding group on it. Well, they just give you a separate card that says allowed to board anytime you want. So you have that. And then they have a meeting place on board where everyone who's on the back-to-back that just wants to stay on the ship, meets there and they wait there. It's in one of the lounges, and you just sort of stay there until about 9:30 till everybody else is off the ship. And then my understanding is they take you off, they run you through whatever they need to do with customs, and then you can get right back on. But we were just, we were wanting to get off. And so we actually had breakfast in Cabanas that morning, did the express walk off. We didn't have any luggage or anything to, take with us or anything like that. And then went down. And one of the things we discovered in the San Juan port is that they have a dedicated pickup area for Uber. And so we just I was, calling it up on my phone, ordered the car, and went ahead to the pickup area. And we had actually booked a walking tour of Old San Juan through TripAdvisor.
Okay. So
the meeting place was, make of it what you will, the Starbucks in Old San Juan. And so, we took the Uber over there. It was about a 5-10 minute ride. We just loved San Juan. So much so that we're talking about, we want to go back there, and we'd love to do a cruise out of there, but we'd probably go like a week ahead of time and spend a week in San Juan before the cruise, because really just is a beautiful city. The people were just so fabulous. They were so friendly, so happy. I think a lot of it is, obviously they're still recovering from the hurricane to some extent, and they're just so happy to have people that are there and visiting the island and helping out with the economy. But we got to sort of walk around the old city and see a lot of the old architecture, the old cobblestone streets. We're able to go to see the forts and some of the other sort of military installations, the wall that they have around the city and where the old guard towers were and things like that. So we just had a great time. And then we asked our tour guide for some recommendations on somewhere to eat, and he sort of was giving us some stuff that we knew was sort of typical. And so my wife said, no, where would you go to have lunch? Mm-hmm. And so then he told us about this other place that we managed to find. And I think we were probably the only people in there that weren't from San Juan, but again, had a very nice experience and had some hopefully authentic food. It was really good. So we were able to do that. And then before we went back to the ship.
What kind of food is Puerto Rico known for? Is it spicy at all, or?
I think a lot of chicken, a lot of pork. Okay. It's not spicy hot, but it is very flavorful. A lot of different herbs and spices and things, but not kind of spicy like you would think about, spicy hot Mexican food or Jamaican or anything like that.
Okay. So now I got a weird question. It just popped in my head, but now you're on a back-to-back. So, there's like so much excitement when you first get on board the ship, you haven't been sailing for a while. Now this is kind of like, were you as excited as you guys left San Juan as you were when you left Galveston? Does that make sense? Not that you were not excited. I'm sure you're excited. But.
I tell you, the most excited we were.
Yeah.
Was actually at breakfast that morning.
Okay.
Just looking around and seeing, I'm sorry, all these poor people that had to get off the ship and didn't get to come back. And we're almost giddy, like, we're just going to get right back on the ship and do it again.
Yeah, it's like a kid with snow day, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've never done a back-to-back before, but that was just so much fun.
Oh, yeah. No, it just kind of popped in my head. That's a great way of putting it. So
we went back to the port, probably got there like around 2:00 or so, and just were able to get right on the ship and no problem with that at all.
Well, now this is your wife's portion of the cruise. Did you guys do anything different this time as far as some of the onboard experiences? Anything different this time?
One of the things we did on the first cruise that we didn't talk about is saw some of the entertainers. They had several different ones, but they really, for this second cruise, had a lot of independent entertainers in terms of like comedians and all those kinds of things. So we went to a lot of those shows. As I said, I think we did Palo dinner on this cruise because we wanted to. So we did Palo brunch on the first one, Palo dinner on the second one. So that was a little bit different. But it was mostly port days. So there was a lot of different excursions and things like that we did for the most part.
Okay. Well, I know that one of the things that we've been getting a lot of requests is talking about the ports themselves. And these are some different ports that a lot of people don't get to go to. And so why don't we jump into those, I guess. So day 2 finds you in St. Martin. What did you guys have planned there?
So I think this is the third time we've been to St. Martin because we've been there on several other cruises. And so the first time that we went there, we did a snorkeling excursion. The second time that we went there, we just wandered around. And I think you and I talked about this, that we went to the Yoda Guy Museum.
Yep.
But this time we wanted to do something different where we could see a different part of the island because the island is divided. There's a Dutch side and there's a French side. And the Dutch side is where the ships dock and where most of the excursions are. But we did an excursion. It's called a RIB boat, which stands for Rigid Inflatable Boat. And it's basically a life raft on steroids. It's one of those things where it's got some speed to it. So we were able to go a lot further around the island and actually go over to the French side of the island, which was really very interesting because they've had some really different responses to the hurricane. The guides were telling us that you can sort of just tell which government is putting more money into restoration, because everything on the Dutch side now is either looking like it's in pretty good shape or it's being put back together. Whereas over on the French side, unfortunately, there are still a number of boats that are just sort of half sunken in the harbor, and a lot of the buildings have not been rebuilt. And so that was, it's really sad to see. It's unfortunate that they still haven't recovered from the hurricane. It's not, this past year, but the year before that, still trying to get back from that. So actually the boat then went sort of through the island. There's this channel that goes through and you go under a bridge, and when you go under the bridge, suddenly you go from the Dutch side to the French side. And then we did a snorkel excursion there on the French side of the island, which was actually really good. Got to see a lot of really interesting fish and things like that.
If I remember correctly, you guys normally bring your own snorkel gear with you, right?
We do. Again, because we were kind of traveling light on this cruise, we brought our masks and snorkels, but not our fins.
Okay. So did you just were you able to just get them through the tour, or did you just go without them?
Yeah, I mean, they had fins available. I mean, they had full snorkel gear available, but fins are fins. I think, my wife especially is a little particular about her own mask and snorkel, but she doesn't really care about the fins. So
yeah, I mean, the mask and the snorkel is probably the most important. The mask is the most important part, so it fits you correctly. But
right, yeah. I mean, she's tried all sorts of masks to find one that fits well, and so.
Anything else in St. Martin then, as you guys finished up that tour?
Again, just had a really good time. And the boat itself was a lot of fun, too, because they really go sort of full out. And I think we'd had a few drinks on the way back, so the boat captain decided to give us a little thrill. Basically just turned the thing up full blast and aimed it like he was heading straight for the Wonder.
Oh, wow.
And then at the last minute just turned and kind of pulled into the dock. So we're fine. It was certainly exciting. But then the other thing that happened that was sort of really interesting to me is we got on the ship and sail away was supposed to be at a particular time. And it was like 20, 30 minutes after that time, and the ship still hadn't left. And we could see the security officer down on the dock who was talking with a woman with a walkie-talkie. And so we were thinking there must be a late excursion that they were waiting for or something like that. But it turned out what they were waiting for was 2 pieces of luggage.
Huh.
And so this golf cart comes screaming along. It's got 2 suitcases in it. They put the 2 suitcases on board, and then they, pull up the gangplank and go. And we never did find out exactly what that was. We just, kind of speculated. Was it maybe one of the entertainers that was coming on board? That was their luggage. Or was it someone whose luggage hadn't made it to San Juan and it was catching up with them? We don't really know the answer, but apparently Disney will not wait for you, but they will wait for your luggage.
Wait for your bags.
To the ship. So that was kind of funny.
Well, from there, you guys are on to Antigua. What did you have planned there?
Oh, snorkeling, of course. Okay. We had not been to Antigua before, so that was a new port for us. Again, wonderful people, very pleasant. We enjoyed the boat ride. It's unfortunate because Antigua, although they didn't have as much damage on the island from the hurricane, had quite a bit of damage to the reef. So one of the things that we saw as we were going out and also as we were on our snorkel excursion is there's a lot of areas where the reef has died and hopefully is going to start coming back. But that was, I think, what was going on there. And the other thing that happened that was kind of interesting is when we got back to the ship, there were several other ships in port, and the captain of the Wonder, I think, decided that he was going to demonstrate our superiority and sort of had this horn battle with one of the other ships that was in port. They were kind of going back and forth, and it was clear that the Disney horn is obviously the one that people like better.
I've seen those online on YouTube. People have posted some horn battles before, but I've never actually experienced it. What was it like? That must have been pretty cool.
Oh, it was fun. We'd set off the When You Wish Upon a Star, and I think it was a P&O cruise. We'd just sort of do their typical ship blast. And,
right.
Then we'd go right back at them. So it was actually kind of fun.
Thinking about being in Antigua, since you said that it's your first time there, did you book through Disney? And I know you've used some other different resources like TripAdvisor, but how did you book your cruises? Or how do you go about booking someplace you've never been before?
Yeah, usually if we've never been there before, we do it through Disney, just because it's just easier to do it that way. And again, if there's something that happens, they're going to wait for you and you're not going to get left behind. So that's what we did at the ports that we had never been to before.
Okay. Anything else about Antigua before we move on to St. Lucia?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, day 4 finds you guys in St. Lucia. Had you been here, and what did you guys have planned?
No, had not been there before and wanted to go to what's called the Pitons, which is basically 2 very large kind of mountainous structures that come out of the island into the sky from the harbor. We really thought St. Lucia was one of the prettiest islands we've ever seen. It's lush and green and lots of beautiful scenery, a lot of very beautiful houses, because the boat ride was probably about 45 minutes to get from the port out to the Pitons. And those are really impressive. They're sort of these large rocky outcroppings, and it's the sort of thing people just need to get online and look at a picture of what they are to really get an understanding for what they are. And then underneath the Pitons, they have an area for snorkeling that was actually really good. Got to see probably more fish there than we saw at any of our other snorkel stops on this excursion. So that was really good and really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'm looking at them. Those are amazing pictures of the Pitons. Were any of these islands tender ports like Grand Cayman, or were they all?
No, we were able to dock in them all. And I don't know if you saw, but there was just an announcement that came out a couple of days ago that several of the cruise lines have gotten together, and I think Disney is one of them, to create a cruise terminal in Grand Cayman.
Oh, really? I missed that. Okay.
And so that's, I don't know how many years away that is, but hopefully that'll take care of some of the problems with people occasionally not being able to get in because of weather.
Mm-hmm. Did you spend any time on the island itself then, or was there much to do, or did you guys just head back to the ship?
Yeah, there was some sort of little shopping in the port area there, and after we got back, we sort of walked around and looked at some things and bought a couple little souvenirs, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, from there, your last port, you guys move on to Barbados. Had you been there, and what were your thoughts there?
Yeah, Barbados we've been to before. So this ended up being sort of a strange situation. I think there were more ships in port in Barbados than are usually in port. And we ended up docking at what I'm pretty certain was actually a cargo port as opposed to a cruise ship port, because right next to our ship was one of those big cargo container lifters. And the port was really, it wasn't very pretty or anything like that. And when we got off the ship, they had shuttle buses right there that took us over to a terminal where you then would have to get another bus or a taxi or whatever it is to get to wherever you were going. So that ended up being a little bit more complicated. We ended up doing another snorkel excursion, and this was one that was specifically to places where there are lots of sea turtles. So we were able to get out and got lots of pictures of turtles and had a good time with that, swimming around with them. And so that was something a little bit different in terms of the things that you get to see on the snorkeling trips.
And as far as the reefs went in Barbados and then also in St. Lucia, they were in a little bit better shape than...
Yeah, they were definitely in better shape and really enjoyed those.
What are some of the most amazing creatures you've seen through all your snorkeling trips there, Frank?
In various places, we've seen stingrays, we've seen sharks, we've seen an octopus at least once that I can remember. Obviously, a variety of different things. And as I think we've talked about previously, we've even snorkeled in Alaska, so I've got the T-shirt to prove that.
No nerves about being around the sharks at all?
Not really. I think if I saw a certain type of shark or a shark of a certain size, I'd probably be pretty nervous. But, I grew up in Florida, sort of in the water all the time, and there's lots of small sharks around. The waters around here, too, and sort of know what to look for. But I think there's always the possibility that you would see something. Actually, the stingrays, sometimes I'm wonder a little bit more about, just because I keep thinking about how Steve Irwin died.
Oh, yeah. With that barb.
Right.
What did you see in Alaska? I can't remember. I know we talked about it, but did you see...
It actually wasn't a lot of... It was a lot of sort of small silverfish. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of just plants that were unlike anything you see in the Caribbean. So that was actually the most interesting thing, is there were plants of like all different colors and different sort of shapes and sizes and things like that. That was actually the most interesting part about it, I think.
I got my scuba license in Puget Sound, so I kind of have an idea probably what you saw. But yeah, definitely colder than the Caribbean. Okay. Well, anything else on your guys' shore excursions that we missed talking about?
I don't think so.
Well, then we finished up with the final day at sea. Boy, after it's come up on day 13 on board the ships here, kind of a sad day because you're finally going to have to be moving off. But how'd you spend that last day?
So we decided to do the Art of the Theme Show tour because we'd not done that on the Wonder before. And, for people who don't know what that is, that's basically where they take you on a tour around the ship and show you sort of not necessarily hidden things, but various features of the ship that you might not have noticed, and talk about some of the thought that went into the design of different areas and things like that. So that was a lot of fun. And then we also finally got to see Ralph Breaks the Internet, which was the other movie that we had wanted to see while we were on the cruises.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. What were your thoughts on Ralph?
I did too. I thought the whole bit with the princesses was just hilarious.
I need to go back and watch just that part because I think there's probably some things said that I missed because it was so quick.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So what was the one where they talked about Merida and said something along the lines of, she's not one of us or something. I can't remember. Or she's from the other studio or something.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And then the whole thing with, like Cinderella breaking her glass slipper to use it as a shiv.
Yeah, I get a kick out of that movie. Well, what an amazing back-to-back cruises here. Is there anything else we missed before we kind of wrap things up?
Just the other thing, as I mentioned, is that for that second cruise, they really did a lot to try to have a lot of different entertainment. So in addition to the shows every night, they had, I think, like 4 or 5 different other entertainers that came and went on board. There was Taylor Mason, who does a lot of Disney cruises. He's a ventriloquist, and he was really funny. There's a guy named Jonathan Burns, and I really don't know how to describe him. He is a very skinny, very limber, geeky-looking person who does things like pass his entire body through a toilet seat and other sort of interesting acts of contortionism. And he was a lot of fun too. And John Charles, who's one of our favorite performers, was on for a couple of days. He's a musician who basically will take requests and basically attempt to play anything that you ask him to do on an acoustic guitar. The one night that we saw him, he did a one-man acoustic guitar version of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, wow.
Which was really interesting. And so they tried to do a lot of that. And the other thing that was new to us, new to my wife and I, because we're not really kind of the Disney Junior people, is the second cruise. There were lots of kids. It was sort of more sort of typical of what we have come to expect on a Disney cruise. It was a lot of fun to have all them around, but we had no idea what a superstar Vampirina is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there would be characters that would come out and the kids would be excited, but when they saw Vampirina, they were just going insane and chasing her around and this whole big deal. And we got home and I actually found it on TV and we watched a few minutes of it because we had no idea who Vampirina was. But she's apparently the big thing right now.
As we kind of wrap things up, how about disembarkation in San Juan, and how was it getting out to the airport to fly home?
Our flight wasn't until noon, so we had some time. So we just went ahead and went to our regular breakfast and Animators and had a chance to see our servers one last time. And then that probably ended up being a miscalculation because when we got back, there were 2 other ships in port. And so we got to see Uber surge pricing in action.
Oh, no.
It was funny because I had checked on my app about what it was going to cost to go to the airport about an hour before we ended up getting off the ship, and it seemed really reasonable. By the time we got off the ship an hour later, the price had more than doubled.
Wow.
So, because I think there were 3 ships that were all sort of getting people off at the same time, but still not too bad. And the ride to the airport was great. And then the other thing that we ran into, unfortunately, on the way home was we flew from San Juan to Fort Lauderdale, which was fine. And then we were flying from Fort Lauderdale to Jacksonville to come home. And our flight ended up getting delayed for about 3 hours. And it turned out that the reason was, this was while the whole government shutdown was going on. And apparently our plane was coming from New Orleans. And that was the day that quite a few of the TSA people in New Orleans decided that they weren't going to come to work.
Oh, no.
And so that caused quite a delay. And the only piece of it that I have the utmost respect for those folks who worked through that when they were not getting paid. The only piece of it that seemed a little hinky to me was this was on the same day that New Orleans was playing in the NFC Championship game.
Oh,
sitting there thinking, okay, that's why they picked this day, is because they either wanted to watch or go to the game. So,
yeah.
I guess that's just cynical of me. I shouldn't do that. We got something to eat there in the Fort Lauderdale airport and just hung out and actually just watched football, and then made it home and got our car and came home and ended a great trip.
I know you guys have got the river cruise coming up this summer with Adventures by Disney. And remind me again, which river you guys are sailing?
So it's the Seine in France.
Okay.
So the trip is actually, I think it's 3 days in Paris, then the river cruise, and then we did a 3-day add-on at the end at Disneyland Paris.
Okay.
Since we're going to be there and we've never been there before.
Did you do that all by yourself, or does Adventures by Disney kind of set that up for you like the 3 days before?
Adventures by Disney set all that stuff up.
Okay.
I did the flights on my own because I kind of knew what I wanted and where I wanted to fly from and all that sort of thing.
Right.
Took care of all the stuff over there.
Right.
And the nice thing about them doing the Disneyland Paris add-on is then it includes all the transfers. So it's the transfer from the end of the river cruise to Disneyland Paris, the hotel, transfers back to the airport after it's over. And with the package, you get basically a super fast pass. Essentially, it's a fast pass that works as many times as you want for all the fast pass rides for the time you're there.
Oh, that's
so given that that's probably the only time we'll ever go to Disneyland Paris, I sort of figured, well, we might as well just do that and make sure we see everything.
Are you guys going to go over to the studios also?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that Remy ride. I know it's coming to Epcot, but
right.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that one, I guess.
And I'm sort of excited about the Space Mountain, where, from what I understand, the launch happens outside the mountain and it blasts you into the mountain.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Wow. Well, I'll be excited to hear what your thoughts are when you guys get back from Paris and whatnot. And yeah, had you ever heard this by any chance? So, when we went to the Mediterranean last year, we used points going over, and then we booked we paid to come back, and it was just kind of crazy. We were having a hard time finding like decent prices, and I won't go into all of that, but I'm on a message board or on a Facebook group with Adventures by Disney, and somebody there was kind of running into the same thing. And I know that most people book their own airfare these days, but you can book it through Disney Cruise Line. And they found out that, this is on the Disney Cruise, not Adventures by Disney, but they actually got a really good quote from Disney Cruise Line to get their airfare back. And I wish I would have at least explored it just to see what kind of pricing they would have given me, I guess.
I've heard that, and I actually did get a quote from Adventures by Disney because I wanted to see what they would come up with.
Uh-huh.
It was pretty comparable to what I was finding online, but then I actually ended up booking the flights on New Year's Eve.
Okay.
For whatever reason, fares dropped because I'd been stalking them. And
right.
I just grabbed it at that point because I started, when we booked this last year, I just put a fare tracker on just to see, kind of what the range of fares was. And then I saw that drop and just grabbed it. So I think we ended up with a pretty reasonable deal.
Perfect. Yeah. And I'm not trying to push, say go through Disney Cruise Line or even Adventures by Disney, but it might be a resource to look at if you're.
No, I think it's absolutely worth checking. And I've heard the same thing from other people, is that they've been able to find them some better airfares than they were able to get otherwise.
And I think that's more.
Sometimes that's one of the costs of a trip that people don't factor in, especially if you're going to Europe. It can be pretty pricey.
Definitely. And I think it probably is more, talking about looking at airfare with them might be more relevant if you're going to Europe or someplace else versus just in the States. So,
right.
Besides the river cruise, do you have anything else booked yet for DCL?
Yeah, so we're doing actually another one of our little last minute trips. We have some friends that are going on a cruise on our spring break and asked us to come along. So we'll be doing a 7-night Western on the Fantasy coming up here in March.
And I kind of
looking forward to that.
I kind of set you up because I knew you were doing that at a time, and we were going the next week, and I'm so bummed that we're not going to be on the same cruise. But
no, that's too bad.
Yeah, you guys will get everything warmed up for us, and we'll just keep it going the next week. So
that's right.
Well, anything else, Frank, before we close out tonight?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for having me on the show. I really enjoyed doing it.
Well, thank you so much for coming back. Our listeners really appreciate all the great tips and information that you bring to the show, and I really appreciate it. And I want to just wish you the best as you guys head out on the Fantasy here in a couple weeks. So we'll be right behind you, and we'll talk to you when you get back, I guess.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Frank, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Bye. Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Frank for coming on and sharing his and his wife's amazing experiences. They did a back-to-back cruise on the beautiful Disney Wonder out of Galveston and then out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, heading on down to the Southern Caribbean, just touching on some ports, which I know we would love to make it down to someday, and I hope you and your family get a chance to go there as well. As a reminder, if you are listening to the show before May 10th, 2019, if you would like a chance to win a Disney Parks pin featuring the back kind of caricatures on the Disney fantasy, come on over to our Facebook page at DCL Podcast and also DCL_podcast on Instagram for all the information to join us in our giveaway. We're going to try and do some more of those coming up in the future as well. And if you're enjoying our shows and would like to become a partner through our Patreon page, you can go over to patreon.com/DCL Podcast and find all the information there. I want to thank each and every one of you who have signed up to support our show. We really do appreciate it and look for some extra content coming out soon. If you'd like to be part of our show, you can always reach out to me at steve@DCLpodcast.com. Of course, you can always reach Christy over at christy@packyourpixiedust.com. You can also find us on Facebook at DCL Podcast, myself on Twitter at DCL Podcast, and Christy on Twitter at PackYRPixieDust. So between now and our next show, if you are heading out on your next vacation, all of us here at the DCL Podcast would like to wish you fair winds and safe travels as you head out on your next adventure. Once again, thanks for coming back and taking a listen, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.